Hello and welcome to a brand new episode of the TraxionGG podcast, where we talk about racing video games, racing esports, and sim racing. I'm Tom, and joining us today will be David Perel and Steve Worrell. David is a real-world Ferrari racing driver, competing with AF Corsa in the European Le Mans Series at present, and we do touch upon that. He's also the founder of the business Speed Capital, which has three major sim racing related brands you may have heard of. Coach Dave Academy for setups in Assetto Corsa Competizione and iRacing, along with coaching and track maps, and a few other services like analysis tools. SimTrader, a brand new website, which is where you can sell or buy used sim racing equipment, and also the SimGrid, where you can join and organise league racing and championship-based events across PC and console. Steve Worrell has recently joined the company as Chief Marketing Officer, so we also talk about his new role within the business and how that might affect things in the future, the new potential features for those services like Delta, which was released last year for Coach Dave Academy, but will this week have a new update with some fresh features that will help auto-install setups not only for ACC but also for iRacing, and then also Mr. Perel's view on the sim racing scene. All those topics and more are touched upon in this longer, more in-depth episode. Let us know in the comments below on YouTube if you've ever used a Coach Dave Academy setup. And for those on Spotify and Apple listening there, please do follow and subscribe. It helps us out. But for now, David Perel and Steve Worrell. Well, hello. It's a pleasure to speak to you both. First of all, how are you doing, David?
Yeah, good. Thanks for having us on. I'm pretty excited, as always, to speak about sim racing, real racing. So, yeah, looking forward.
Yeah, likewise. Pleasure to speak to you. We've got some meaty topics coming up. And Steve, how are you doing?
Yeah, good. It's good to see you again. I know we've spoken just literally a few minutes ago, but it's good to see you as always.
Yeah, it's always a pleasure to speak to you, Steve. All good. Right, so there's a lot to get into here, and we're mainly going to talk about sim racing and the business side of things by Speed Capital, because you've got some exciting projects. But before we get into that, it would be remiss of me not to mention, Dave, real world racing, because you're very experienced, done a lot of driving many laps in Ferraris. Just quickly though, how's your ELMS season going so far this year?
It's been a strange one because our calendar is it's loaded towards the end of the year. So up until last weekend, I'd only done one race the entire year, which was really strange. By then, I'd already done at least 6 or 7. But they were rebuilding Imola's pit area for F1, and they ran over and they had to cancel our race. Which moved that to the end of the season. So
right.
I've only done 2 races this year, which feels weird. It's even less at this time of the year. It's less than what I did during COVID. But I think it's going well. First race was a little bit tough. The second race we did just now, Paul Ricard, we were leading for quite a long time, and then a safety car kind of nullified our lead. And because of the driver order, that put our bronze against the golds, which compromised things. But we still could have done a podium, but then we had a gearbox failure, which we had to reset on track, and that pushed us down to like P5 or so. So championship-wise, it's only 2 races in, so it's not worth mentioning anything on that side. But it's been fun. Last year, the GTEs, which is sad.
Yes, will you miss them?
Absolutely, they're the best cars I haven't driven many racing cars, but I have driven a DTM car, for example, and this thing to me feels better than that.
Wow.
I'm sad to see them go, but it makes sense. These cars are too expensive to run. There's not enough manufacturers involved. It makes total sense to go the GT3 route. And a common misunderstanding is everyone thinks the GTEs are much faster, but they're not. They're like 1.5 seconds a lap quicker, and I'm pretty sure you can attribute most of that to the tire. So if you put the super sticky GTE tires on a GT3, the GT3s may actually go quicker.
Right.
But I'm sad to see it go. It's every time I go to a racetrack now, I say to my co-drivers, don't forget, this is the last time we're driving this car at this track. So we're just trying to enjoy it as much as we can.
Well, yeah, everything does seem to be getting a bit homogenized, but we'll see how the GT3-based formula works next year. Looking forward to checking that out. And I suppose final point on the real-world racing going into sim racing, do you think your real-world experience, provides the business with a unique advantage over some other products that are out there?
I do think so. It's mostly just the methodology that we use in how we run Coach Dave on the setup side, because we do have a unique perspective there. Whether or not it's better, that's obviously debatable. But I've always wanted to keep an element of, if you say, realism in what we do in the sim racing side. But to be honest with you, I've since I was like 12 or so, I've been heavily interested in like comparing lap times through racing video games with people in forums and so on, and my experience also in web development. So I do think the actual unique point is combining the three areas where I've spent most of my life, which is racing, web development, and sim racing. So I was just on GT Planet earlier today, and I registered my account there in 2003.
Yeah,
so
wow.
It's been 20 years there, and there was a forum I was part of even before that one. So it's pretty wild.
So the current business activities combines all your major passions and expertise, hence why we have a successful company.
Genuinely, I'm living the dream, my personal dream, honestly, because for all three of these things, I have an equal level of passion, but they're all extreme levels of passion. So I never feel like I'm doing any work. I'm always playing, which is crazy. But I hope it continues, honestly.
That's an enviable position to be in. If you wake up and you feel like you're playing, fantastic.
Yeah.
It's what I feel like with Traxion, to be honest, as well. So I think we're both in a good position there. And then hopefully that's the same for Steve, because Steve, this is a brand new role. First of all, just explain what's new.
Brand new role. So I'm now CMO at Speed Capital, which isn't, although I've not done specifically CMO role before, it's more in line with my career history. So I was obviously CEO at SimRacing GP, a competitor to SimGrid, but I've moved over to Speed Capital specifically to work with Dave on Coach Dave. And SimTrader, right, and some other as yet unannounced projects which are super exciting. But the CMO role is something that it was an obvious fit for me, to be honest. When Dave initially mentioned it, it was we're trying to think about where we might fit in the organization, and Dave was just like, well, you come in as CMO, and I was like over the moon with that. And so far I'm in my 4th week, and it's been brilliant so far. I've really enjoyed it. It feels like it was definitely the right move for me. As much as I loved my time with SimRacing GP, probably felt like done everything I could with that. And after speaking to Dave about the plans that he has for Speed Capital, I was on board pretty much from the first meeting, which but funnily enough, we were all there together the first time that we met. It was Rensport last year.
Oh, yeah. Right, back then when we didn't really know each other, but right, we were all there somehow.
I didn't even know what Steve looked like. I just knew that this guy called Steve ran SGP, and then this guy walks over and says, "Hey, dude, I'm Steve from SGP." I'm like, "Oh, cool." And we got on. Like that was the problem.
Right.
Every time I was bored at Rensport events, it wasn't that boring, but if I had free moment, I was like, let me go chat with Steve. And that's kind of slowly but surely where things started, which was strange because we are competitors at that point.
But I was exactly the same. I was just like, there's I think people were expecting us to not get along and expecting us to like steer clear of each other. But like from the first moment, it was like, do you know what? We've got a lot in common here. We're trying to do similar things with similar companies. But I think actually it goes beyond that. I think we've actually got quite similar tastes in a lot of stuff, in like especially in the aesthetics of like the way things should look online. And our feelings about sim racing in general. I think we've got similar tastes in what makes a good sim and what the industry's missing. So it was kind of an easy choice, honestly. Hearing about what the plans are, it was quite an easy choice for me.
Interesting. So Rensport, bringing people together. We'll see how that progresses over the next few years.
Exactly.
But that's a topic for another time, perhaps. Okay, well, that's great. So I suppose let's dive into the bread and butter. I want to touch upon Coach Dave Academy. Now, to me, I think I've listened to some interviews with you before, David, on there on the internet, and you've talked about how it came about. But and I want to really talk about what's coming up and what's new. However, one more time with feeling, if that's all right. Just if you could talk me through the genesis of Coach Dave Academy, first of all, please.
It was. I mean, it wasn't like one day there was something, nothing, and then next day was something. It kind of was brewing slowly when, in my attempt to become a professional racing driver, they only pay you when you're at racetracks. And especially like the first 3 years when I'd moved from South Africa to England, I was trying to make ends meet somehow. I was genuinely broke at the time. So I decided to do some YouTubing, but even that was an evolution. First, I was just sharing hot laps with no commentary. Then a very close friend of mine called Nick said, "Hey, dude, do some commentary over your laps because this is boring as hell." And then by coincidence, I landed up in a race on Gran Turismo Sport against Super GT. And we had a bit of a race at the front. I didn't even know that there was this streaming world, if you will, in sim racing. I wasn't very familiar with it. I knew Jimmy had a popular channel. And then someone pointed it out to me that I was in this video with Super GT, and I thought, I'll commentate over some of my sim racing videos there, in the similar style to Super GT. And then I figured, well, if I'm doing that, why not do the commentary over the real racing videos, the onboard stories which I created. Right. And up until then, it turned out I still can't find anything before that date where real racing drivers were commentating over their onboard videos. And that sort of just took off like a rocket. And it actually exposed David Perel, like that brand, if you will, to the sim racing world in a different way. Different from like my kart number 38 forum stuff. Yeah. And people were asking me, can you do some coaching and so on? And I thought that was a joke. So literally as a joke, I put a /coaching page on my davidperel.net website. And I think within 30 seconds of hitting publish, someone booked a session.
Wow.
And that's kind of where the moniker of like Coach Dave came along. So I was just coaching, doing stuff like that. I wasn't heavily involved in ACC at the time because during that period, ACC was still trying to like identify what it was, and the physics and stuff weren't sorted and everything. So I was still very much fixated on Gran Turismo and a little bit of iRacing. But slowly but surely, I realized that when I did get into ACC, I needed a car setup. And I had a lot of experience with car setups in Gran Turismo, but not in ACC. I didn't have the time to learn it. I was borrowing setups from other people. And then I ended up coaching a guy called James Parker. He contacted me for some coaching. And he was so quick in ACC. There was nothing for me to coach, actually. Maybe he was just trying to show me how quick he was. And I shared with him this idea that, I'm actually looking for someone to make setups for me that I can sell online, because I think there's a business there very similar to what was happening with VRS and iRacing. I was familiar with the VRS business model. And long story short, he was like, cool, I can make some setups for you, which he did. And then when COVID hit and the lockdowns hit, I was in a space where I wasn't making any money from racing. Right. And I think within 2 days, set up CoachDaveAcademy.com, said to James, like, hey, dude, I'll pay you to do setups and I'll sell it on this website. And it started like that. So what we were anticipating was like this cute little side project where we could make some money during the COVID lockdown. And in the end, I ended up employing James full time, and it grew from there.
And now here we are, over 3 years later. Yeah. It's a fully fleshed out business. That's a great story.
Pretty much, yeah.
I think the pandemic accelerated many things in sim racing, and it got those who were willing to grasp an opportunity really went out there and did so. And this is one example. I wanted to touch upon, moving from just having the one person hired there to sell some setups online. Now there seems to be a steady stream and an intense volume of setups available, especially when platforms are constantly adding new content or updating physics. So how do you keep on top of that? What's the process behind the scenes?
Yeah, so for a long time it was just James, and then we brought in another guy called Ulti or Alaric from South Africa, and they were just doing the setups. And now, so it was two guys. I was never doing setups myself. I could obviously identify like what a setup should feel like, but I wasn't going to be able to push it to the ultimate lap time of ACC and so on. I wasn't going to pretend that. I was always handling the website side of things. So it was like, you could say the three of us and Coach Dave, and then we had Michael Hamlet, which we'll cover later in SimGrid. Now there's 35 drivers and engineers working between ACC and iRacing, and then 5 operations guys, if you include myself, Ulti, who's now managing the website content, and James Parker he's head of ops of Coach Dave Academy. He keeps the gears turning. He's the one who interacts with all these 35 drivers and engineers. We have these pretty tight schedules, release schedules. Everything's planned ahead of time on that side. He runs a really well-oiled machine. It's a monster now. We always when we're talking privately, we can't believe what it's become.
Yeah, it sounds like James has got his hands full there, trying to manage that, and everyone else involved in the operation side.
So it's plus managing me and having to deal with my requests. Yeah,
that's probably the biggest challenge, right?
It can be.
Actually, James is a pretty decent peddler himself. Actually, I saw him testing a sim at the Goodwood Festival Speed recently, and it was like a McLaren with no ABS and no traction in a motion rig, and he was doing better than everyone else who tried it that day. Certainly.
He has a really, really good sense of timing, which I think is key to being quick. So when you release the brake and when you turn, that's a sense of timing. I think he could have been a really good racing driver. Just from a pure skills point of view. Obviously, there's lots of elements, but from a skills point of view, he could have been a pretty good driver.
Well, we'll stop bigging up James's ego too far. Yeah. And just from my personal experience, sometimes I love driving, sim racing, whatever you want to call it, in a virtual world, because I don't have the talent or budget to try and do it in the real world. But I still find car setups myself a bit bamboozling, and I suppose one challenge maybe with Coach Dave Academy is to try and make it approachable or accessible. I don't know if you want to touch upon, Steve. The company has some innovations recently that might assist with that.
Yeah, well, quite frankly, that was one of the reasons where I was like, I need to make this move over to Speed Capital with Dave, and I subsequently obviously met James. And when they showed me Delta for the first time, because I'd been putting it off for quite some time because it was Coach Dave and competitor, and I didn't really want to support too much, so I'd been putting it off. But when they showed me Delta working and what it did, I was like, this is by far the most the biggest step forward in making hardcore simulation accessible to just an average driver like me, right? I'm not a fast driver by any stretch. I think I might have finished third in a championship in split 7 or something once, but that's about my limits of my sim racing achievements. But when the thing which always just feels like I was always on the back foot was setups, because there would either be these insane super fast setups which are twitchy and horrible and can't drive them, or I'd be digging through a Google Drive looking for some shared setup or something, and I was it was honestly becoming a bit of a pain. And then they showed me Delta, and I was like, my God, I should have done this. I should have done this when this came out, because it's just the convenience of it is just. It just, like I say, it's the biggest step forward, I think, in making this stuff accessible for a long time. And glad to say that there's new update coming for Delta, which is the app which we produce, which it automatically installs these setups. So you download the app, you enter ACC or iRacing, and you jump into your session, and all of your setups for that session are there. In ACC, it automatically adjusts your tire pressures as well. For the server settings, it's just like a casual sim racer's dream. And we've got a new version of that coming out on Wednesday, which gives parity between the two games, so ACC and iRacing. All the features that you have in iRacing, in ACC, you'll have in iRacing, minus the tire pressures, because it's not so relevant in iRacing. But it goes a step beyond that as well, which is things like the replay files or the hot lap video. If you're getting up to speed and you're still finding yourself half a second down, you can say, all right, where am I losing time? And you'll be able to click on the hot lap video within the Delta app, and it will show you the hot lap recorded by the Coach Dave driver. And you can see where you'll be losing your time. And then again, if you want to go further than that, there's Motec data, there's popometer data. In iRacing, there's ghost laps. It's a really well thought out solution. And that's I think that's going to be a big step forward for this app, because like Dave, when you were saying that, you can't believe what it's become, I still think there's even more to come. I think, when people see this sort of like solution bundled together in one place, I think that will kick us on even further.
Creating setups and now selling them, like there's a lot of people who are doing what we're doing. It's difficult to differentiate when you're just selling setups. It really is. Also, like there's different flavors of setups out there. There's the esports fast ones, and then there's ones which we focus on, which is more like if you got 2-3 hours a week and you get home from work and you don't have time to fiddle with setups, so you don't have time to make your own one. Or in this case, you don't have time even to download and install one, from the website, log in. I forgot my password. Where do I put the file again? Because I haven't played in 2 weeks. I've forgotten where that is. We're just trying to streamline all of that stuff just to make it a little bit easier. Like there's so many barriers to entry in sim racing. Like that's what the challenge is of growing our industry. Genuinely speaking, it's like difficult to set up a rig. It's difficult to even know what equipment you need for the games and so on. Mm-hmm. Once you find the games, what content and bundles and extensions do I need? And then you got all of that. It's like, oh, well, I'm 2 seconds off the pace because I don't have the right setup.
Right.
Where do I find that? I mean, especially in iRacing. In iRacing, if you don't have a custom setup from Coach Dave or VRS or Craig Setup Shop, you're not going to be on the pace in your daily races. So all these barriers I'm trying to look at with everyone at Coach Dave and at SimGrid and so on, to be like, how do we start to lower those things so we can grow this industry more? That's been a dream since I was like 15 years old.
Yeah, well, that's key to try and grow the scene, because if it becomes too obfuscated or challenging to, first of all, like you say, buy all the equipment, subscribe to the gaming platform, and then you're miles off the pace, it can be a big off-put. Especially in like the pandemic as well, there was this big boom and a lot of people were just new to it, and the industry needs to try and sustain that long term, I think. But I've got a couple of questions about the general sim racing industry, I suppose, later on. But yeah, so just to be clear, Delta is this Windows app. You download that. If you're a Coach Dave subscriber, then you boot ACC or as of the 2nd of August iRacing, and it knows what you've entered, what the track conditions are. It downloads the setup already, and then I can just click 1 or 2 buttons and I'm good to go. And I think that's a key.
You wouldn't even have to click anything anymore.
Oh, sorry.
So just as long as Delta's open and it's connected to your account,
right?
It can run in the background. We have like designed new interface for it, which will also be live, which makes like Steve was saying, like to get your popometer data and so on, it's easier to click around. But if you just want to hide it in the taskbar, you can do that. Like Trading Paints. Trading Paints is actually the best usability in the world. Like automatically boots up at startup, and then when you enter an iRacing session, your car has the livery that you need. Like we need that for setups as well. So.
Yeah. Okay. Well, looking forward to seeing that evolve over time. I think it was launched initially in September last year, correct? And then it's had some updates, and now there's this significant one that bundles iRacing in there alongside the Sette Corsa Competizione process, which is all automated. Wonderful. Like what Steve said there, never having to change tire pressures manually myself. Oh, it's almost worth it for that, right?
Yeah, exactly. I'd never want to do that again.
Yeah,
I understand it's important and I understand how much time there is, but I must be the most, the sort of guy on the voice call in the race chat where it's like, oh, what should my tire pressures be? That's me. So I'm glad I never have to do that again.
Obviously, there might be a really obvious answer to this question, which have maybe been answered before, so apologies. But the service seems to be really focused on the 2 main platforms, ACC and iRacing. Have you ever considered branching out to some other titles as well?
Just depends if those titles have setups which are, or physics which respond to setups.
Right.
Like we've tried with AMS2, for example, and we've just found that, if you just min and max everything, then you don't have to actually do anything. So I don't think there's enough differentiation there. Our engineers wouldn't be needed there. And, maybe there's something in the F1 games, like F1 2023, but we haven't explored it. Mm-hmm. It's more like, iRacing and ACC have really complex setup systems that the cars respond to, like in a big way. So you can create value there. You can create something where you're not just selling snake oil, which is common criticism of setup companies. It's just snake oil. I can go faster with the aggressive setup and so on. That's not always the case. We wouldn't be, in our case at least, we wouldn't have full-time like qualified engineers helping make these setups if it was just a case of minning and maxing dampers and suspension and so on.
Also, you look at the esports scene and the drivers at the pinnacle. Yes, they're putting hours in the practice, but they're also refining their own setups, and so there's clearly time to be made there.
Absolutely, yeah.
And I suppose just on the topic, you mentioned it there about if the platform itself has to really respond well to setups. It also has to have a really strong competitive community as well, perhaps, because iRacing and ACC are extremely popular, and a lot of the effort or time spent on those games is competing online, whether that's professionally or not. If it's in a league or just an online event on SimGrid, for example, that you may have joined. So that was my attempt at a segue. So obviously SimGrid is, it's a place for people to come together. And what interesting, I didn't realize until just looking recently that you also include console players on there and some Gran Turismo stuff. So I need to sign up to some of those events.
Are you a Gran Turismo player, Tom?
I've gone past the point, I think, in my life where I don't have time to commit to ACC and iRacing enough, even though I've got an active subscription to iRacing and I have ACC. Gran Turismo 7 seems to be nice and easy. I boot it up and it's nowhere near, people will not call it simulator. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying it's a nice medium. It's a nice balance for me in my life at the minute. And so GT7 is my go-to, I think.
But do you actually play it?
Yeah.
Like, do you play it like you were gonna play WRC and join my league?
The thing with that is I signed up and then life.
Life happens.
But SimGrid, first of all, if you just talk to me in general terms, how do you think that's going? Because that's another project that was born out of lockdown initially, right?
It had like there was like these breadcrumbs left from my early 20s. I created a website back then called GT Playground, where I wanted to see, this is Gran Turismo 3 days. I wanted to see if I was the quickest Gran Turismo driver. There was no online play. Lap times were like lost in forums and so on. So I created this website, gtplayground.com. I wish I kept that domain, where you could upload your own lap times, and there was leaderboards and so on. There was no gamification or anything. There was a forum and there was leaderboards.
Right.
And then peer-to-peer, you'd send someone a replay file and they'd validate your lap and so on. Anyway, this is like pre-Twitter days, so very little virality. I couldn't really get it to grow, abandoned it, but assumed like one day either all the games are going to do something like that, or or someone else is going to make something. And then in lockdown, trying to find leagues and so on in ACC, shocker, it didn't exist. Ironically, Steve had exactly the same observation with his co-founder at the time, Thomas and Ruslanis. And we kind of launched around the same period, I think. But at least from my side, uniquely, we had some cash flow from Coach Dave, which I could invest into building SimGrid. So we bought some source code from a guy called Tony, who originally created the RLM website, brought him on board, and then just slowly chipped away. Initially, like I wanted SimGrid to be a website where we created the best leagues possible. So invested a lot of money into like creating our own races and so on. But to be honest with you, I think Steve's route was much better by opening it up as a platform to others, for other communities to create events and so on. So we invited 1 or 2 hosts to log in using our admin rights and create their own races. And then it kind of evolved from there. Now it's actually mostly community focused.
Yeah,
that's what SimGrid is these days. Obviously it's multi-platform, but that's because there's still no like central place for you to go for your sim racing. There's no Facebook of sim racing. And I hope that SimGrid becomes that one day. So it's a super long project. It doesn't grow like we don't see the growth that you've seen on LFM, for example, or even SGP. SGP was bigger than us. But every single day it's bigger than the day before, to the point now where we almost at 50,000 users and close to close to 400 hosts, communities, if you will. Most of them active on the platform. It's incredible. Also, now a sizable team that operates that system. So yeah, it was a pet project that's now becoming something which I think, if we do the right things, it could be really big one day.
Interesting. Well, we'll see how that plays out. And I suppose we could just briefly touch upon, I don't know, Steve, if you could talk to this, but I did see that the layout of SimGrid on the website recently changed. Was it just a few days before we were speaking, right? So it's constantly evolving still.
Dave's brought me on to work on the Coach Dave as SimTrader and that side of the business. Okay. But obviously I look at SimGrid and look at the updates and what's coming, but I'm not actively involved in it on a day-to-day. Fair enough. But the one thing I would say is I've always been an admirer of SimGrid, and I've always openly said, like, internally at SGP, but also externally to anyone that would want me to try and goad me into criticizing SimGrid. I would always say the thing that I love about SimGrid is the way that it's presented, and the look and the feel of it has always been something I was a bit envious of. And this latest update, which Michael and the team and Dave have built, is another good step, another positive step, which if I was involved, I would have been like, that's probably the right way to go. And that's a really positive step. So it's just made it more accessible for people. And I get that word again. And I think that's just the common theme for everything that we're sort of working on, is just accessibility, and just try and make it as easy to get involved as possible. And I think that new home screen, you've done a really good job.
The home screen comes a lot from most of the changes we make on SimGrid is because of what the hosts, the community managers themselves request. Like, that's our main focus. Right. And Michael Hamlet, who's you could say our, I wouldn't say necessarily head of product, but he guides a lot of our product development from a testing perspective and interacting with the hosts. He feeds back the problems that we have on the thing, and then I work with someone called Denise. She does deliveries in ACC like that in the game, and she's also a really good interface designer. So we work together to come up with mock-ups, and then we pass it back to Michael, who then tests it with our developers. And the homepage now, it's just trying to be able to bring more, because there's so many communities on the platform now. When they were listing events, it would just get lost. It would fall off the page almost immediately. So we just try to prioritize that stuff and make it easier for them to have exposure to all the users that are visiting the website on a daily basis, which is in the thousands. And also for the end user to find races, a lot of the players, I think you and I are similar, Tom, we play ACC when we can, but also Gran Turismo. Until recently, you wouldn't even know that Gran Turismo was on the platform, but it's been there for close to a year now. Right. So just trying to surface, we are not just ACC. We do ACC, iRacing, console stuff, Gran Turismo. There's even Forza if someone wants to make that. Hopefully one day Mario Kart even, or Circuit Superstars, which I love. I love Circuit Superstars.
Yeah, that'd be a good one.
Yeah. So that's just the aim. But SimGrid will keep evolving. This homepage everything's a test. If it works, if it converts, people sign up. That's cool.
Yeah, I think, like I say, I mentioned I wasn't aware that Gran Turismo was there until I was looking just last week. So something clearly worked with the new page layout design, because I was like, oh, hang on a minute. Am I free on those days? Shall I sign up to that? That one's full. Oh, maybe this one. So we'll look to do some of that soon. Moving away from slightly, still on SimGrid, but from the league-based elements. I think you're involved with the SRO GT World Challenge esports series, which is for the pinnacle, the serious, the professional teams. Just if you could talk to me through what's your involvement there at SimGrid?
Yeah, so there's three parties involved. There's SRO themselves, AK Informatica by Alessio, and ourselves. And we provide the technology for people to register, championship management, and so on. And also a little bit of human resources, more so on the virtual side. So all of the off-site events, Michael Hamlet's famous drivers briefings and so on. Yeah. He's behind all of those, and we provide a lot of data to try help with the BOP. This is the first year you're seeing that the BOP is adjusted race to race. That's pretty rare. So Michael's very involved on that side. And, you know, it's everyone gets criticized for it. You're never going to win with this BOP debate. Deep down, I wish everything was just the same chassis with a different body shell in these elite races.
Right.
But because of my involvement as a racing driver in the SRO series, when we saw the ESRO stuff go live and we just actually kind of launched SimGrid, I reached out to SRO and said, can we help in some way? Like, here's the tech. You know, can you use this tech? Because otherwise you're going to use Google spreadsheets, which was their plan. And that relationship has kind of evolved since then. So nothing breakthrough that I don't think anyone in the sim racing world doesn't already know, but we're just trying to keep doing what we can with SRO.
I suppose the final point I want to touch upon with the SimGrid specifically, before we move on to SimTrader, which I find fascinating. You know, in the past, you've done, been involved in some great initiatives like the Women Race Series that you had, and you've got the VCO Grand Finals, or in cooperation with VCO Grand Finals later this year. Are there any other sort of tentpole events or improvements that we should expect from SimGrid going forward?
So look, we do a little bit of collab with LFM.
Yes,
because they have a brilliant platform. We sort of just took a view. We want to try and collaborate with people as much as we can. And funny enough, with Steve, our first discussions with Steve, prompted by him, but like with an open mind from our side as well, was how do SGP and SimGrid work closer together? Because we're working closely with LFM, we work closely with VCO, SRO, and so on. More Female Races was through a collaboration with Taya, who was a YouTuber at the time. She's not that involved anymore, sadly. And, you know, I think that we can provide more value if we involve in like the sort of top line, but we want our hosts to shine through more and more,
right? Which
is like what the grand finals are about. It's like, instead of focusing on esports drivers and esports teams, like, let's focus on the communities and like the people involved there. To me, it feels more like those are each community is like a little city. Like, let's put them together and see what happens. And that's kind of going to be the extent of SimGrid's involvement in esports this year. It's just the grand finals. And then we'll help facilitate other ideas, but in the background. So that's our thinking on that front.
Right. Well, we'll see how the communities grow over time, especially with the newer features and being able to soon link LFM stats as well, I believe.
Working on that for a while. We have the data, we just need to put it through. Like, there's only 2 devs at SimGrid, so we always have to
of course,
like what's more important. And at the moment, the most important thing is what the actual community organizes, the hosts, whatever they want, we're building. That's our main focus.
I see. Yeah, you've got to prioritize as well. But like you say there, LFM's made a great community as well, so it makes sense to work together on that. I can see behind Steve, you've got some nice sim racing equipment there.
Oh, yeah.
Ever tempted to upgrade that and maybe sell some of that equipment?
I've actually just scaled back. I've actually...
have you?
This is a classic segue.
Is that not a segue, dude?
Harrison Lord
That's supposed to be so amazing that you don't tell, but they're clearly not.
I've actually just scaled back. This is like my optimum rig now.
Right,
okay. I had a motion rig. That's come off.
You had a motion rig, dude?
Yeah. I never got on with it. It was... do you know, I only ever used it when someone was coming around, like a friend was coming around with his show.
Oh, yeah.
Showed off,
yeah. Oh, yeah, like go and have a go in the motion rig. And they're like, well, this is brilliant. And then I get in and I feel sick. And it just wasn't doing it for me. So that's come off. SimUQ, wheel, next level racing rig. That's it. And it's that's all I've got. And a round wheel for my rally, because I love my rally. But I put a bunch of kit on the SimTrader website, which Dave created just a few weeks before I joined. But it's if you don't know about SimTrader, it's a place to basically advertise your kit that you're selling for sim racing kit. And it's a new project, so seeing how it's how it's going to grow. I don't know, Dave, if you've got any sort of thoughts on how it's going and what the plans are that you want to share.
Yeah, look, the idea is fairly simple. It's not revolutionary. It's just I couldn't believe that there wasn't a classifieds dedicated to sim racing. Everyone's still selling stuff on eBay and Facebook Marketplace, and there's nothing for sim racers to list their stuff to like-minded people. There's also like high levels of fraud on eBay and Facebook, which is a key problem that I'm hoping we solve further down the line. But SimTrader right now, I think it's still an experiment. You know, we're trying to do quite a lot of stuff on Coach Dave and SimGrid. And up until Steve joined, SimTrader was just created and managed by myself while my team were working on the most important projects. I think that there's potential there. Like, I think that idea, if it's executed right, can be really, really cool and successful. I'm not sure what the business model is. I'm still trying to figure that out. But it's shocking. I mean, guys, how is it possible that in all this time, with all the equipment that everyone spends money on and so on, and I know that people sell all their gear, that there isn't sim racing classifieds dedicated. So, you know, maybe it turns out that SimTrader is the one. Certainly going to put a lot of focus into it over the next few months, especially with Steve joining. Like, this is one of his mandates, is to try and grow that idea. But right now it's still early days. It's got a little beta thing. It's a WordPress website built by yours truly with a page builder. And it already has like 400 or 500 registered users and so on. So, you know, it's cool with zero marketing and so on, but it needs much more to be successful. And it's actually quite a challenging thing. You need buyers and sellers. You need to bring both of them to the platform at the same time. You know, buyers aren't going to list stuff if there's no sellers. So trying to find that sort of, I don't know, that balance, if you will, is going to be Steve's fun problem to solve.
Well, no pressure, Steve. I follow the automotive industry quite extensively, and a YouTube content creator, Doug DeMuro, he set up outside of his car reviews, he did Cars and Bids, which is a car auction by Insight, and he just sold that for many millions of pounds. So Steve, over to SimTrader. I think
challenge
you've got it
accepted.
No, but just it's a website, and you can list things all across Europe. Correct? You can use PayPal to buy or sell
anyway,
or cash in person, like Facebook Marketplace. In that respect, would you facilitate it in the future, or?
Yeah. So right now it's just like discovery. It's like, I want to list something, and then you discover that someone's selling steering wheel. You email them, and if you're both verified, the email gets through, and so on. End of story there. Maybe further down the line, if we see that there's lots of listings happening or fraud is increasing and we get a lot of complaints, I want us to facilitate the purchase like an eBay does. I hope that we get to that point, because that's, I think, from a business perspective, that's where the value will be created, because we can charge like a small margin either to the buyer or the seller. But at the moment, it's just like, hey, Steve's got a steering wheel. Why don't you contact him to buy it at the moment?
I was just thinking, in terms of like the current alternatives, which is like Facebook and eBay, I mean, it's got to be better solutions than that. I mean, eBay, I'm just fed up of the convoluted hoops that you have to jump through to buy and sell on eBay, and Facebook Marketplace and Facebook buy and sell. I'm just I struggle to find quality listings, and especially specific things that I'm after. So it's like, it's kind of almost feels like a bit of a lottery there. Like, am I going to log in today and see the thing that I want? I don't know. So I think Dave's right. I think there's a ton of potential in the idea, and we're going to have to put some time into it to try and make it work. So watch this space.
I think it could be really key for the sim racing market, because you have to be very specific, I think, with what it is and the condition and how it's working. And I know that sounds like a generalist thing. You should always be specific with your listings online, but in my opinion, especially with Facebook Marketplace, it might just be steering wheel, and it's like, yeah, but what?
That's my point.
What is it?
It's like the Wild West there. It's just like, who knows what condition this thing's going to turn up in, if the thing's actually going to be there. Like, are you going to get a response? It's just so yeah, like I say, it's a ton of potential in that idea, and we just got to make it work now.
Right. Well, for those listening, you can Google SimTrader, check it out now. I was on it earlier today. There's there was a Next Level Motion rig. Was that yours, Steve?
No.
There was some Thrustmaster wheelbases, and there was even like a full setup. So it's quite varied. Some Logitech entry-level stuff as well. If you're just getting into sim racing, that's quite an affordable way of doing it if it's used. And we'll see how that tracks. Best of luck with the project.
Thanks.
Yes, appreciate it.
So I think we've talked, a fair amount about the three main pillars of Speed Capital. But I also, before we disappeared, I also wanted to touch upon sim racing space in general, because you're both very experienced in this scene and you're very opinionated as well. So I'll start with you, first of all, Dave. What do you think are the major challenges for sim racing coming out of this pandemic boom? And also, if there are any opportunities as well for sim racing? So the good and the bad.
The good and the bad. The main thing was the pandemic gave us a preview of what sim racing can look like, but many years from now. When that boom happened, we still had a lot of I refer to them as usability issues. If you try and run R Factor and all that stuff, and if you try and play certain games online, etc. So, there's a lot that needs to be refined there. But I think right now, in the current market, we are lacking games, I think.
Yes.
ACC is heading towards, if you will, its end of life. Kunos are very open about the fact that they're working on a new game. We don't know what the timeline is on that, and what's the period in which the ACC starts to be played less. And I kind of wish that there was like a third pillar or third game to be there. We always thought it was R Factor 2. Now we're kind of hoping it's Rensport, but Rensport also has a long development period. I would love for there to be another sim. I really would. I'm desperate to play more games. I play iRacing in Gran Turismo 7 and ACC a lot. But, we're all gamers. We all just want to keep trying other things, and I just wish there was one more thing, game to play. So that to me is the main issue right now. It's just the options. And that's such a typical reply for there'll never be enough, but I definitely don't think the two are enough right now, just to grow the audience and keep us more engaged and so on. But on the positive side, there's tons of positive elements. It has grown so much that, it's not just Coach Dave. Coach Dave, one of the main things I was proud of is we were actually able to pay sim racers to drive in a sim rig every single day. And now there's many other sim racing companies which are offering the same thing. And it's not just the drivers anymore. It's commentators, stewards, organizers. There's starting to be this economy that's growing out of these games, out of the platforms, out of the products. I think that's awesome. And it's still very early days. It looks a lot like the industry I came from, WordPress. It looks like a lot like those days. And I think it's going to grow even bigger than what we saw there. Steve, fire away.
Yeah, largely in agreement with what you said. But I think you only have to look at, Thomas, you'll see yourself with your stats of traction. I'd imagine it's still climbing, right? You just look at the on Reddit, the subreddits like rsim racing, r/iRacing, ACC or whatever, and you just see it's just steadily growing. They're just day by day growing. And I think we're heading towards a future where sim racing is going to become so important to the motorsport space, because we're about to head into electrification and who knows what. So how are we gonna experience some of these cars if not on the sim? So I think the classic cars, right? So the cars of the V10 F1 cars that we're doing now, that we get a lot of enjoyment from racing in the sim. But let's fast forward 20 years. That's going to be even more important. I think we're in a good place. I think there's been a few shocks for people that came in during COVID.
Yeah,
thought,
definitely.
Here's a cash grab. Yeah, and I think everyone. I've been sim racing. I can't believe this. I say that I've been sim racing for 20 years. I've been racing for longer than that. It was only dawned on me when you said you joined GT Planet in 2003. I reckon I must have been racing Grand Prix 2 since 97, something like that.
Sure,
so it's just crazy. But I think everyone that's been in who've grown up with the scene and watched it evolve was always kind of wary that this is not going to last this COVID boom. So all of our planning, especially at SGP, I'm sure Dave, you were the same. All of the planning was sort of tempered with this is where we are now, but the expectation was here, and that's where we should be tracking that number there. And I think it's started to settle down, but there's no signs that it's going to slow down, if that makes sense. If things have settled, but we're still motoring on. So poor pun, didn't mean it, but you get the idea.
We'll roll with it. Interesting viewpoints there. And Steve went deep and big with the macroeconomic impact of electrification and how sim racing can help. I'm impressed. But I also think, what you were both saying there, I think there has been like this big burst of activity through the pandemic. I feel like there's been a slight cool-off period, but it's across the entire video game industry. Yeah. But it's still a net gain, and it's how things move on to keep pushing forward. And I really hope what you mentioned there, David, was that there's some good new sims to go alongside the existing ones, because even though the existing ones can continue to be developed and add DLC and still have a really big, sustained, engaged audience, new products drives competition. And that might be innovation. There's a lot more to talk about, a lot more to discuss, a lot more to compare, contrast, a lot more setups to maybe sell. So I think it helps the entire industry. And I think my view is sim racing now should... there'll be some consolidation, but everyone should pull together and understand, no, we still need to keep pushing forward, try and help this be sustainable. So
I agree. That's going to happen naturally. The sustainability, it's just going to happen naturally because there is some momentum that's starting to build. And the COVID boom was almost like a fake bump. And now there was definitely a lull and so on, but everything that's happening now, I do think there's a little bit more authentic growth behind it and interest. It's just going to take time. Everyone needs to be patient, until we figure out stuff like how difficult it is to set up a rig and how difficult it is to decide on what equipment you need. Those two things are pretty major barriers, I believe, in taking this to critical mass, if you will. Even just having the space in your apartment to put a rig somewhere is a challenge on its own. So, once we start to chip away at what those solutions are, then we'll start to see really rapid growth. On the gaming side, it's more how do we keep the existing audience engaged, by adding more games and finding more streamers and superstar streamers and so on.
But I think it is happening. And you mentioned Renspot there. It could also be Le Mans Ultimate. There's Straightfall Studios. There's quite a few people and
I'm excited.
Things in the works I'm really pumped for. And I think it's just being patient, like you say there, because these things do not appear overnight. I suppose your business didn't appear overnight in the sim racing space. It was an idea a long time ago. So thank you very much for your time. I think just to wrap up, Steve, I guess we'll be seeing more of you as you get up to speed with the new role. I suppose, are you looking forward to the challenge that's ahead?
Can't wait. It's like I say, the first 4 weeks have been brilliant already. Dave and the team have made me feel at home, and just some of the ideas that are floating around, that we're going to try and address a lot of the things that Dave's just talked about. How can we make this more accessible? How can we make it more engaging for the long term? And it's going to be fun. It's going to be fun.
Yeah, should be good. And Dave, I suppose to end, slight handbrake turn. But what was it like being behind the scenes of the Gran Turismo movie?
Oh, that was insane. That came about because I was reading on GT Planet that there was this movie going to be made about Jan Mardenborough's career.
Yeah.
And I was and they said it was being directed by Neil Blomkamp, who's South African. But more importantly, his half brother was my best friend when I was before I was 10 years old. So I found his email address through a family connection and cold emailed him, subject line, "I can help with your Gran Turismo movie." And he replied almost instantly saying he didn't remember me at all. He's just wow, crazy that I sort of mapped out in this email that my career vaguely maps to Jan's, because I also tried to get into real racing through GT Academy and did quite well and so on. So he said, okay, cool, well, I'll speak to the producers, and next thing I know, I'm speaking to the script writers. Next thing I know, I'm on set. I was on set from day one with all the actors and so on. and just giving my input from the sim racing and real racing side. So trying my best to give sim racing an accurate depiction in the movie.
Right.
And yeah, it's crazy. I mean, there's obviously going to be some negativity around it because historically racing movies have been terrible. And we're still probably going to see some Hollywood cliches in this one. I wasn't involved in the editing outside of like a couple of like minor little details. But I did try to give us the best sort of representation in there. I had to coach all of the actors in sim rigs, which was really stressful because we were very short time frame. I had to teach them all how to drive. Some of them had never driven before because there's quite a few extras involved in like the GT Academy scenes who race against each other. And then, yes, it's going to be something. But it was surreal. It was absolutely surreal. There's a moment, I don't know if I actually get in, but there is a sequence where I do a cameo in 2 scenes. And being on the other side of the camera, like seeing like these massive like cameras and like 200 people on set and the light is shining at you was ridiculous. It was ridiculous. So yeah, I don't know if that makes it in. I'll know next week though. I'm going to go to an early preview of the movie and I'm nervous as hell. I got to be honest, but I hope that gives sim racing some exposure. I made sure that like all the hardware that's used in the movie is accurate to what we have today. There's not just one brand that dominates the movie from the sim racing side. That I try to involve as many brands as possible to keep it realistic. Like the rig that Jan has in his house is different to the rig that he plays on later in the movie because he's upgrading, you know. So those details hopefully shine through and hopefully brings new sim racers into our world. I hope people start to Google like, how did Jan do this? You know, what did Jan play on? What hardware did he use? Like, what is that thing in the scene? And it brings more people into our world. So that is, I just hope it's positive for us more than whether or not there's a fake downshift, which it probably is going to be, but you know, I can't help it. So.
Well, as of the time of recording, it's out in a week or 2, and so we'll see. But I'm with you there. I just really hope it just it brings more people in, and I think the sim racing and motorsport fraternity may get out their magnifying glasses, but that's not really the point. It's not really the point. No, the point is an entertaining movie for everybody that might inspire a new generation, which is what GT Academy did back in the day.
And if they want a super detailed film, they'll just wait for the SimGrid film.
Oh, right.
No, dude, I've already made a movie now and I will never do that again. It sucked the life out of me, guys. It was like every single day you wake up around 4 a.m., you're on set 5:30 and you work till 9-10 p.m. And if you're lucky, you get to eat lunch, you know.
Wow.
And I was in a very, very privileged position. I sat right next to the director the whole way through the movie. Like there's a director's tent, in there was Neil Blomkamp, and like to his right 3/4 was David Perel going fake, real, don't say that, say this, go tell him to do that, move that around. I will never do that again. I was beyond burnt out when I got back.
Well, it's certainly worth it, and for sim racing, it's a big thing, I think. So we'll certainly be watching it soon and covering it, and I hope it's well received. Well,
yeah, me too.
I suppose all that's left to be said is you can find the SimGrid and Coach Dave Academy and SimTrader online. The Delta update that also automatically installs your iRacing setups is on the 2nd of August. But for now, a pleasure speaking to you both.
Likewise. Good to speak to you, mate.
Thanks so much. Thanks, dude.
Well, thank you very much to David and Steve for their time there. Really appreciated. I hope you found that insightful because they have a lot of opinions about not only the future of sim racing, but how sim racing in the present here and now can be sustained and also more accessible to more people. So be sure to check out the Coach Dave Academy, SimTrader and SimGrid links in the description. As I said earlier, please do like and subscribe on YouTube. Follow the TraxionGG website on a daily basis for the latest sim racing and racing game news. We've also got this podcast on Apple and Spotify. Please do follow and subscribe and rate, provide feedback on those platforms as well. But I'm really keen to hear your opinions on either SimTrader, Coach Dave Academy, or the SimGrid. Have you used those platforms in the past, please let me know in the comments below. Send an email at podcast@traxion.gg too. And we'll be back soon-ish with a new episode. We're taking a little pause in the podcast to record some more episodes in the background. But be sure to follow the Traxion website and social media feeds for when we return. All right, that's it for now. I'm going to stop rambling. Keep it pinned.